Hello, this is Lesson 25, Session 2, Converting Larger Units to Smaller Units. In this lesson, you can convert among different sized standard measurement units within a given measurement system. For example, converting 5 centimeters to 5/100ths of a meter, and use these conversions in solving multi-step real-world problems. To start today, which expressions are equivalent to 1,500? Explain. Pause your video and solve these problems, and after you have them all written down, press play again and we'll go over them together. All right, looking at these expressions to see which ones are equivalent to 1,500, I am going to remember my powers of 10. So I know that if I am multiplying 1 5/10 times 100, and I notice that there are 2 zeros here, the easiest thing to do is to move my decimal point 2 times to the right, because I know if I'm multiplying by 100, then my number is going to become larger. So there's 1, there's 2, and if I add a 0 there, then what I'm going to end up with is 150. That is not equivalent to 1,500, so we're going to cross that one out. The next one is 1 5/10 times 1,000. When I multiply by 1,000, I move my decimal 3 times, moving it 1, 2, 3, and those are going to have zeros. So this is going to equal 1, 5, and then 0, 0. And that one does check out, 1,500. Okay. 1 5/10 times 10 times 10 times 10. Well, each time I multiply by 10, I move my decimal point 1 place to the right. So there's times 10 times 10 times 10. And I'm going to fill each of these blank spaces with a 0. So I now have 1, 5, and then 2 other zeros. 0, 0. So that one works as well. Okay, 1 5/10 times 10 to the power of 3. That tells us that I'm going to move my decimal 3 times. 1, 2, 3. I can already tell you that looks familiar, and I think this is going to work out. There's 1, 5, and those 2 zeros for those spaces there. All right, I know if the 3 works, the 2 probably is not. So that tells us we're going to move our decimal 2 places to the right. 1, 2, there's a 0 there. 150 does not work, so we're going to cross that one out. Hopefully you got the same answers I did. Okay, this is on page 513 in your math books. In some parts of the world, travel distances on road signs and maps are given in kilometers. How many meters are there in 3.5 kilometers? 1 kilometer equals 1,000 meters. Okay, pause the video, and after you have it worked out on your math book, press play and see if we got the same answer. Okay, I'm going to circle the information that I need. So I'm going to read it one more time. In some parts of the world, travel distances on road signs and maps are given in kilometers. How many meters? How many meters are there in 3 5/10 kilometers? And so that's important there, 3 5/10 kilometers. And it's also important that we know that 1 kilometer equals 1,000 meters. All right, so let's start with 3 5/10. And we are converting from kilometers to meters. There's going to be more meters than kilometers because each kilometer is 1,000 meters. So I'm going to multiply 3.5 times 1,000. Now this looks really similar to what we did on the previous slide. So if I'm multiplying by 1,000, I'm going to move my decimal to the right 3 times. So here's my 3 and my 5, my decimal's right here, and I'm going to move it 1, 2, 3 places. And I fill in those blank spaces with a 0. So here my answer is 3,500, and I'm converting 2 meters. We want to make sure we don't say 3,500 kilometers, because that wouldn't make sense. 3,500 meters. All right, we're looking at the model it on page 514. The table shows the relationship between meters and kilometers. 1 kilometer is 1,000 meters, 2 kilometers, 2,000, 3 kilometers, 3,000, and so on. So we know that if it's 3.5, that would go right in between these two. It'd be halfway between. So we know that it'll be halfway between 3,000 and 4,000. The pattern in the table shows that the number of meters is always 1,000 times the number of kilometers. We can multiply the number of kilometers by 1,000 to find the number of meters. So to find the number of meters in 3.5 kilometers, multiply 3.5 by 1,000 and write the answer in the table. And so that's exactly what we did. Multiply by 1,000. That's going to move that 3 places, and that's where we get our 3,500. All right, still with me? Let's keep going. Looking at the difference between kilometers and meters, here is a map that I found online where we have Entheos Academy, which is right here. And I was trying to find a distance that is approximately a kilometer away from the school. If you were to walk out the front doors and start walking down the driveway, along 6200 South, and then you turn at the gas station, and down here is Cougar Park. So if you walk down Cougar Park and go to the playground at that park, it's 7/10 of a mile, which is really, really close to a kilometer. A kilometer is actually 8/10 of a mile, so this was really, really close. So to give you an idea of about how long a kilometer is, if you start at the school and walk all the way down here and get to the park, then you have walked about a kilometer. So let's compare that to the size of a meter. This guitar is approximately a meter. So if you take this guitar, well, take 1,000 of those guitars rather, and you lay them end on end, it would take 1,000 of these guitars laying end to end to reach from the school to the park. So kilometer is definitely a longer distance, and there are more meters inside of a kilometer. There's 1,000 meters inside this kilometer distance. So let's use that information to answer the questions on the next page. Which is a smaller unit, meters or kilometers? Go ahead and write down your answer. The smaller unit, of course, is meters. The size of that guitar was a lot smaller than the distance from the school to the park. How do we know? Well, it takes 1,000 meters to make 1 kilometer. So meters are a much smaller unit. Number 2, what operation do you use to convert from a larger measurement unit to a smaller measurement unit? We would use multiplication. We would multiply. The larger unit here is the 3.5 kilometers because kilometers are larger. So we would multiply 3.5 times 1,000 to get 3,500 meters. Number 4, use what you learned about the relationship between meters and kilometers to complete the table below. So we know that to convert from kilometers to meters, we multiply by 1,000. So go ahead and pause your video. Make sure you fill in all of these squares. And then when you press play again, we'll have the squares all filled out. So 8/10 times 1,000, you should have 800. 1 85/100 times 1,000. We move the decimal 3 places there. So that would be 1,850. 2 3/100, we multiply that by 1,000. Move our decimal 3 places. So we get 2,030. And then those are already done for you. So how many meters are in K kilometers? There are 1,000 meters in each kilometer. So for each kilometer, there are 1,000 meters. Number 6, there are 3 feet in 1 yard. Explain how you decide whether to multiply or divide by 3 if you need to convert from yards to feet. So let's look at a previous question here to help us decide this. Number 2 says, what operation do you use to convert from a larger measurement unit to a smaller measurement unit? And we decided that we would use multiplication. So let's apply that same knowledge to this one. If there are 3 feet in a yard, would we multiply or divide by 3 if we need to convert from yards to feet? So yards is the larger unit of measure, and feet is the smaller unit of measure. So we're going from a larger unit of measure to a smaller unit of measure. So up here it says from a larger measurement to a smaller measurement, we use multiplication. Okay, number 7, reflect. Look back at your try it strategies by classmates, strategies that I've shown you, model it and solve it. Which models or strategies do you like best for converting larger units to smaller units? And explain why you like that strategy the best. Okay, on page 516, we're looking at number 8 at the top of the page. How many ounces are there in 4 1/2 pounds? Show your work. 16 ounces equals 1 pound. Now you might be a little bit thrown off by the fraction here. Don't let that scare you. We'll work it out together. So if I have my chart here, I know that 1 pound is 16 ounces. Let's label that pound. LB is pound and OZ is ounces. So 1 pound is 16 ounces. So 2 pounds would be 2 times 16, where we would get 32 ounces. 3 pounds is 3 times 16, that's 48 ounces. 4 pounds is 4 times 16, that's 64 ounces. 5 pounds is 5 times 16, which is 80. Now 4 1/2 is going to be right between these two numbers here. So if 16 ounces is 1 pound, then 1/2 of a pound would be half of this number right here, half of the 16. So 1/2 pound is going to equal 8 ounces. So if this is 4, if 4 pounds is 64 ounces, and I take 64 plus another half pound a pound was 8 ounces, and I add that to it, 64 plus 8 equals 72. So this is one way that you can solve it. You can take 4 times 16, where we get 64, and then decide half a pound is 8 ounces and add the 64 plus 8. Okay, another way you can do this is we can multiply 4 and 1/2. I know that 4 1/2 is the same as 4.5. And so I can take 4.5 and I can multiply that by 16, which I get 6 times 5 is 30. 6 times 4 is 24, 25, 26, 27. And if I'm done with that, I'm going to drop my 0 there. And I want to cross that out so I don't use it again on accident. And then 1 times 5 is 5. 1 times 4 is 4. And when I add together, I get 0. 7 plus 5 is 12. Carry my 1, 4, 5, 6, 7. And I have 1 decimal place in my problem. So I put 1 decimal place in my answer. And I get 72 this way as well. So this is a great way that you can check your work to make sure you did it correctly. If you get the same answer doing the work in 2 different ways, then there's a good chance that your answer is correct. Number 9, how many millimeters are in 9 25/100 centimeters? Show your work. 1 centimeter equals 10 millimeters. So how many millimeters are in 9 25/100 centimeters? We're changing centimeters to millimeters. I don't know why it does those lines. I'll get rid of those. So if I'm starting with 9 25/100 centimeters, then I'm going to multiply to convert it to the smaller measure. So there are 10 millimeters in each centimeter, so I'm going to multiply this amount by 10. And when I'm multiplying by a power of 10, all I have to do is move my decimal point. So I'm moving my decimal point from here. It's getting larger, so 1 place to the right, and my decimal moves there. So 9 25/100 centimeters is the same as 92 5/10 millimeters. Number 10, Robbie's fish tank can hold 65 liters of water. How many milliliters of water can the fish tank hold? 1 liter equals 1,000 milliliters. So looking at important information here, we have 65 liters of water. Liters are larger than milliliters. We're going from a larger unit to a smaller unit. So we're going to be multiplying by 1,000. So if I have 65 and I'm multiplying by 1,000, I know that my decimal point on whole numbers like this is just at the end. And so I'm multiplying by 1,000. I'm going to move it 3 places, 1, 2, 3, and then fill those spots in with zeros. So the answer is going to be D, 65,000 milliliters. Okay, your assignment for session 2 is pages 517 and 518. Feel free to send me a message if there's any questions that you have, and make sure you take a picture of your green pages and send that off to me to grade. I'll see you for the next session.